You know, marriage is a funny thing. You think you know someone after 4 years of sharing a bed, a mortgage, and a morning coffee routine. You think you've mapped out every corner of their soul. And then, one single, freezing moment changes everything. It's like a glass house that looks perfect from the street. But inside, the walls are vibrating with a frequency you can't hear until it finally shatters. My name is Vanessa. I'm 27 years old. And 3 months ago, my life didn't just fall apart, it exploded. It turned into a series of police reports, legal fees, and the kind of silence that rings in your ears like a constant scream. But let me back up, because this mess didn't start with the sirens. It started much earlier, back when I convinced myself that I was settling. Mark and I met at a mutual friend's engagement party. He was safe. He worked in compliance and auditing. Not the most thrilling job, right? But he was steady. He made $74,000 a year, and I pulled in $62,000 working in brand marketing. We were the responsible couple. We bought a house in the suburbs 2 years into our marriage. We split the bills exactly 50-50. We had a spreadsheet for everything. Every grocery trip, every utility bill, every vacation fund. The thing about Mark, he was obsessed with systems. He had a system for how to load the dishwasher, a system for the exact rotation of our tires. He even installed this high-end dash cam in his Honda last year. He spent weeks researching it. Front and rear cameras, night vision, audio recording, crystal clear footage. He used to talk about evidence and protection, like we were living in some high-stakes crime drama instead of a quiet street where the biggest thrill was the mail arriving early. I used to roll my eyes. I'd tell him, "Mark, you're auditing our life. Just live it." But he would just give me that calm, steady look and say, "Vanessa, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it." Our marriage was functional. It was a well-oiled machine. But machines don't have hearts. They don't have passion. And after 4 years, I was starving for something that wasn't calculated in a spreadsheet. I felt like I was living in a cage made of rules and routines. And I was just waiting for someone to leave the door unlocked. Then, 6 months ago, Sebastian came back into the picture. Sebastian was my college boyfriend. He was everything Mark wasn't. He was unpredictable. He was loud. He took risks. We had this connection back then that burned so bright we almost took each other down with it. When we broke up after graduation, it was because he got a job as a pharmaceutical executive across the country. We agreed long distance wouldn't work. We were young. We wanted to conquer the world separately. But then, there he was, back in town. He reached out on social media. One simple message: "I'm back in the city. Coffee?" When I saw his profile, I felt a flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. He looked successful. He looked expensive. He was making well over 6 figures now. He had the Audi, the designer suits, the life I felt I had traded away for Mark's stability. The first time we met for coffee, I lied to Mark. I told him I had a late strategy meeting with a client, sitting across from Sebastian. It was like stepping out of a gray room into Technicolor. He talked about his trips to London, his promotion, the house he was looking at in the hills. He remembered the way I liked my latte. He remembered the projects I'd worked on years ago. "You look beautiful, Vanessa," he told me, leaning in. "But you look tired. Is life in the suburbs that exhausting?" I laughed, but it felt forced. "It's just quiet," I said. Every conversation with Sebastian was a reminder of what I'd given up. I'd go home to Mark asking if I'd remembered to sync my calendar for the upcoming furnace maintenance, while Sebastian was texting me about the wine he was drinking at a 5-star restaurant. The contrast was brutal. I started finding excuses. More late meetings, more girls' nights. Sebastian validated my frustration. When I complained about Mark's latest obsession with organizing the garage shelving by weight capacity, Sebastian didn't tell me to appreciate Mark's practical nature. He told me, "You're too vibrant for a man who cares more about shelves than his wife's happiness." I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I told myself it was Mark's fault. If he weren't so boring, if he weren't so rigid, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for a spark. I was the victim of a dull life. That was the story I told myself. The day it all shattered started with a dinner invitation. We were supposed to go to Mark's sister's place. Another evening of hearing about property taxes and neighborhood gossip, I could already feel the boredom suffocating me. Sebastian's car was in the shop for some routine maintenance. He'd mentioned it earlier that day, and because I wanted to see him, because I wanted to show him off to myself, I did something risky. Mark, I said as we were getting ready. A friend from college is in town. Sebastian. His car is in the shop, and he lives right on the way to your sister's. Can we pick him up? Mark paused. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He knew Sebastian was an ex. I'd mentioned him once or twice. He got that tight, quiet expression, the one that meant he was bothered but wouldn't say anything directly. That's fine, he said. With Mark, that's fine meant it absolutely wasn't. But he'd rather swallow his feelings than have a confrontation. He was so passive. It irritated me. He picked me up from work in his sensible Honda. We drove to Sebastian's luxury apartment complex. Sebastian slid into the back seat, smelling like expensive cologne and arrogance. Wow, Sebastian said, looking around the interior of Mark's car. This is cozy. Really takes me back to college when we all drove economy cars. I saw Mark's hands tighten on the steering wheel. He didn't respond. He just pulled out of the parking lot. About 15 minutes into the drive, my phone rang. It was my mother. She was having some crisis with her insurance. I knew I had to take it. Babe, I said to Mark, can you pull over? I need to focus on this call. Mark found a quiet residential street and parked. I got out of the car to pace on the sidewalk, trying to calm my mother down. Inside the car, things were getting tense. I could see them through the windshield. They were talking. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language was aggressive. When I finally finished the call and got back in, the air was thick. Come on, man, Sebastian was saying. You look exhausted. You've been squinting at the road the whole time. When was the last time you had a real break? Let me drive for a bit. I'm used to high-performance driving. I'm fine, Mark replied. His voice was flat. Don't be like that, Sebastian continued. Just relax for once. Vanessa, tell him. He looks like he's about to fall asleep. I looked at Mark. He did look tired. He'd been working extra hours on some audit. But more than that, I wanted to see Sebastian in the driver's seat. I wanted to see him take control. Mark, just let him drive, I said. You've been working so hard. Take a break. Don't be so controlling. The word controlling hit him like a physical blow. Mark prided himself on being reasonable, being the opposite of a micromanager. He looked at me through the rearview mirror. It was a look of deep, profound hurt. But he didn't fight back. Fine, he sighed. Whatever. They switched seats. Mark moved to the passenger side. Sebastian adjusted the mirrors with a smirk. I climbed into the back seat. Sebastian drove differently. He was fast. He was aggressive. He took turns with a confidence that bordered on recklessness. Mark sat stiffly, his hand occasionally reaching for the door handle. Relax, Mark, I said from the back. He's got it under control. I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was being the fun wife. I didn't realize I was pushing my husband off a cliff. We were approaching a four-way stop. There was another car already there, an older sedan. An elderly woman was behind the wheel. It was her turn. She started to move. Sebastian didn't slow down. He was mid-sentence, telling some story about a gala he'd attended. Sebastian, stop sign, Mark yelled. But Sebastian was already rolling through. He thought he could beat her. He accelerated. The woman didn't expect it. She kept coming. There was this horrible, high-pitched screech of tires, and then the world turned into a nightmare of sound. The impact hit the passenger side. Mark's side. The airbags deployed with an explosive boom. Glass shattered, raining down on us like diamonds. The car spun, a sickening, dizzying rotation that felt like it would never end. When it finally stopped, there was silence. Except for the ringing in my ears. I was dazed. I felt blood trickling down my arm. In the front seat, Mark was slumped against the airbag. He wasn't moving. Sebastian? I whispered. Sebastian was gripping the steering wheel. His hands were shaking. Oh God, oh God, oh God. I unbuckled and tried to open my door, but it was jammed. I had to climb out through Sebastian's side. Mark was starting to groan. He was coming around, but he looked terrible. There was blood on his forehead. The elderly woman from the other car was already out. She was standing about 20 feet away, holding her head, looking at us with wide, terrified eyes. "Are you all right?" she called out. Mark was the one who reacted. Even with blood on his face, and even dazed, he pulled out his phone. He called 911. He gave them our location. He requested an ambulance. He did it all with that calm, systematic confidence that I had always hated. That's when Sebastian pulled me aside. He grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. His eyes were wild. "Vanessa, listen to me. I need you to help me." "Help you?" "Mark is hurt. That woman is shaking. I have a DUI on my record from 2 years ago," he hissed. "One more strike and I lose my license. I could lose my job, my career. My whole life is over if they find out I was driving." I stared at him. "What are you saying?" "Tell the police Mark was driving," he pleaded. "He has a clean record. He was in the passenger seat, but we can say he switched with me right before the light. Your husband is a compliance guy. They'll believe him. Nothing will happen to him. But me? I'm facing felony charges." I actually laughed. It was so absurd. "You want me to lie to the police?" "Sebastian, look at the car. I'll pay for everything," he said, his voice urgent. "All the damages, the medical bills, whatever it costs. You won't pay a dime. Just say he was driving because he was tired. Please, Vanessa, if you ever cared about me, don't let my life be ruined over one mistake." I looked at Mark. He was still on the phone, checking on the woman, making sure everyone was safe. He looked small. He looked like he could handle it. He was steady, right? He could handle a little trouble. But Sebastian? Sebastian was my ticket out. He was the future. And that's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers. They started taking statements. They looked at the wreckage. They looked at Mark, who was sitting on the curb with a paramedic cleaning his head wound. Sebastian was pacing. It's playing the role of the worried friend. I pulled Mark aside before the officer could get to him. "Mark," I whispered, "Sebastian is in real trouble. He has a DUI. He'll lose everything if they know he was driving." Mark stared at me. His eyes were clear now. And very, very cold. And maybe you could say you were driving. You have a clean record, nothing would happen to you. We can say you were just confused from the crash." The silence that followed was the longest of my life. Mark's expression didn't change. He just looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in years. "You want me to commit fraud?" he asked. "I want you to be compassionate," I pressed. "Think about his future. You're not exactly irreplaceable at your job, Mark. But he has a whole career at stake. If you love me, you'll do this." "If I love you?" Mark repeated. "Yes. Prove that our marriage means something. Help me protect my friend." Mark looked over at Sebastian, then back at me. He didn't say a word. The officer walked over. "All right. I need to know who was operating the vehicle at the time of the collision." Sebastian looked at me, pleading. I took a deep breath. "Actually, officer, my husband, Mark, was driving. He was just very tired. I think he might have been confused about the switch." Mark didn't say anything. He just sat there. "Is that true, sir?" the officer asked Mark. "Were you the driver?" Mark looked at the officer. Then he looked at me. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "No," Mark said. My heart stopped. "Mark, what are you?" "I was the passenger," Mark said firmly. "My wife pressured me to let her friend drive." Sebastian was behind the wheel. He rolled through the stop sign. "And then, my wife asked me to lie to you to protect his record." "Mark!" I screamed. "How could you be so selfish?" But Mark wasn't finished. He stood up slowly, ignoring the paramedic. "Officer," Mark said calmly, "I told you I like systems. I told you I believe in protection." He walked over to the wreckage of his Honda. He reached inside, to the dash cam that was still mounted on the shattered windshield. He hit a button and ejected the microSD card. "This is a high-end unit," Mark said, handing the card to the officer. "It has a backup battery." It was recording the whole time. Front view, rear view, and most importantly, high-sensitivity audio from inside the cabin. My stomach dropped into the earth. "It recorded the accident," Mark continued, his voice as steady as an auditor's. and it recorded the conversation we just had. Every word of it. Sebastian went pale. He tried to run, but the other officer was already there. The police reviewed the footage right there in their patrol car. It was all there. Sebastian's reckless driving, my voice, shaming Mark into giving up the wheel, Sebastian's desperate plea for us to lie, and my voice, asking my husband to commit a crime for my lover. They arrested Sebastian on the spot. Reckless driving. Driving with a suspended license. Causing an accident while uninsured. And then, they turned to me. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we also heard your attempt to coordinate a false report. That's conspiracy to obstruct justice." They put me in handcuffs. Right there. In front of the neighbors who had come out to watch. Mark didn't look at me as they loaded me into the back of the car. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood there, holding his side, watching the tow truck pull his car away. He looked relieved. The legal process was efficient. My lawyer told me my best option was to take a plea deal. Misdemeanor obstruction. 1 year of probation. 500 hours of community service. A heavy fine. It stayed on my record. My company found out. They didn't want a brand manager with a criminal conviction for lying to the police. I was fired within the week. Sebastian got 6 months in jail. His pharmaceutical career was over. His parents had to pay for his high-priced lawyers, and he ended up back in his hometown, working at a retail store. But the real punishment was the silence. Mark filed for divorce the day I got out of central booking. He didn't even come to the house to get his things. He hired a moving company. He communicated only through his attorney. The house was sold. The systems were dismantled. All those spreadsheets, they were just divided in half. 50-50. Just like we'd always done. I walked away with $62,000 after the house sold. Enough for a security deposit on a tiny apartment and a few months of groceries. But nobody wants to rent to someone with my record. I ended up moving back in with my parents. At 27 years old, I'm sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of who I used to be. The worst part is seeing Mark move on. I check his social media sometimes. I can't help it. He looks happy. He found someone else. A woman who looks steady. Someone who probably appreciates his grocery apps and his dishwasher systems. They're living in a nice house. They have a new car. And yes, I can see the dash cam mounted on the windshield. I sit in my room and I think about that night. I think about the look Mark gave me when I asked him to lie. I still tell myself. And he was the one who destroyed us. He was the one who pulled out that card. He was the one who chose a piece of plastic over his wife. He was so rigid, so uncompromising, so weak, that he couldn't even bend the rules for love. But then, I look at the handcuffs I kept in a drawer as a reminder, and I realize, Mark didn't destroy our marriage. He just audited it, and I was the one who didn't pass the inspection. I'm still waiting for the world to feel vibrant again, but all I have is this room, my parents' disappointment, and the crushing eternal weight of the silence. It turns out, Mark was right. It's better to have the truth and not need it than to need it. And realize you threw it away for a ghost.